Welcome to Logic and Argumentation. I'm Doug Beatty, the professor of the introduction here of philosophy. So we're going to be learning some new vocabulary and some new insights to what philosophy is, how it works. In this video, we're going to look at some two definitions or several of things, several definitions, and we're going to look how to do some logic. In this first one, for the definition, it is a definition of philosophy is a combination of two Greek words. One, phileo, is a word for love. Greeks had four different words for love, but this is like Philadelphia, the brotherly love idea. Phileo and Sophie. It's a Greek word for wisdom. The love of wisdom is really what philosophy is about. It could be a study of anything. People get a PhD or a doctorate in philosophy in different things of history, mechanics, chemistry, and so on. You can get a doctorate in all sorts of things. You can even get a doctorate of philosophy. But what we have in this is very different than the MD, where you get a medical doctorate. So a PhD is a philosophy doctorate in that particular field. A medical doctorate is obviously a doctor in medicine. But what we're doing as a philosopher, we're looking for different reasons. We're willing to debate and to discuss and deliberate about different issues within this field. I like the word dialectic, is getting to the truth of the matter. Analyze and study to better understand. So that's what really philosophy is trying to do, and we're going to look at different parts of that. Different arenas which philosophy really deals with, and different people in the history of philosophy that has really brought it to the forefront as we know it today. Some people, there's a guy by the name of actually William Lane Craig, said that we ask normative questions about what it is, what ought to happen, and why, and then we analyze and criticize the assumptions that underlie that field and clarify the concepts within it. Finally, integrate the discipline with that particular discipline with other fields. So we're willing to look at and really dig deep and trying to figure out why, what, how, is going on in the field. A philosophy is a second order of discipline. The first order is actually the discipline itself. Say chemistry, they look at the chemicals and so on. The doctor or the philosophy, a person within that field will step back and say, okay, you got that part right, but how about if it does this, or what about that? They'll examine it deeper and make some of the thoughts wider. Criticize. We'll learn to defend and learn to be a critic in a good way, not as a nitpicker or nagger or hate monger. But we're trying to learn things to make them better and to understand better. The philosopher will understand themselves better and be able to question viewpoints correctly and fairly, and be able to understand life better and everything around them better. But we'll not become an excellent philosopher just from taking this class. We'll have a better understanding of the field and understand what's going on with it. And I think it will help you in life in a lot of different ways. The comparison within philosophy and other things, really, it helps us to clarify our answers and give us skills to better communicate any matter at hand. It is the mother of clarification. So let's get to it. We need to become dispassionate and passionate at the same time. Don't be emotional about things we hold, but yet we have to be passionate, really know them firmly and hold them well. But how do we do that with philosophy? And that's what we're going to understand here. Page 16 in the big questions, it's talking about the rules of inference. There are laws of thought, and we have two things that are found here called premises and then conclusions. They're syllogisms, and these are ways of thinking, and there's patterns for these ways, and this is one of them. It's a syllogism. When a deductive argument proceeds correctly according to this form, it is deductively valid. They are either valid or invalid. They aren't right or wrong or other things. When a deductive argument is presented, it is either a valid or deductive. Doesn't matter if the premises are true or not. It's a valid argument. But we might say it's unsound because the premises are false. We'll get to that here in just a minute. A deductively valid argument will be in the proper form, and we're going to look at that. Here is the form. All has a premise 1 is all men are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is a man. And the conclusion is therefore Socrates is mortal. This is both valid and sound. Sound because the premises are true. It's valid because the form of the argument, which is called a deductive argument, the form is correct. So here we look at some different ways of looking at the premises. All P's are Q's. S is a P. Therefore, S is a Q. Now all we can do is assume that these premises, all P's are Q's, and the premise S is a P are true. If they are untrue or incoherent or totally ridiculous, you'll see that. But these are representation of truth statements, that are true or valid. So we need to understand that they're correct. In this particular argument setup, this is a form that looks kind of like an addition table, doesn't it? Q's plus Q's equal more Q's or whatever, but it looks like addition, subtraction. I think arithmetic actually builds a wonderful foundation for logic and for philosophy. But here we are trying to understand and learn the difference between valid and invalid arguments, and it stands on the form. The form must look like this in some way or another, with different sentences. The P's and Q's and S's in this particular picture, the premises and conclusions just stand for sentences that you might be able to pick. Challenge yourself to create your own. All cows are purple. Socrates is a cow, therefore Socrates is purple. Okay, while true, it is valid rather in form, it is not a good or not a sound argument because it's ridiculous. Cows aren't purple. We recognize that these sentences are not true, so it brings our deductive argument unsound. Even though it's it's set up right, it has a proper form, it is unsound because the premises are totally ridiculous, or the premises are untrue. They're not true. And then the same with the actual mathematical thing that we found in the same page in your book. 3 plus 2 equals 8 is a valid argument, but it's unsound because the conclusion is false. The conclusion is untrue. Okay? It's valid but unsound in both cases. take a look at these different pages that you've looked at that I've presented in this video. Hopefully it'll help you understand a little bit more about philosophy and the way it works. Not totally done, going on. To be totally sound, it must be true and valid. And to be unsound, it could either be invalid or untrue or both. So we see in this, sorry about the telephone ring, had to deal with something, but we find that the argument can be and is sound when it is both true and valid, but unsound if anything is untrue or if it's an invalid structure, as arguments go. You can look on page 403 and through 406 and see these things. I want to point out the differences between these two statements. The one on the top is all P's are Q's, S is a P, therefore S is a Q. The difference, what is the difference between all P's are Q's and S is a P versus all P's are Q's and S is a Q? Recognize that S is a Q here, but a P here. Because P's are first, then become Q's. But here, P's still become Q's, but this is incorrect conclusion. This is a false conclusion, and it would be unsound. I don't know if you're familiar with the biblical studies of priests. They were all to be Levites, but not all Levites were to be priests. So this could be replaced with here, all priests are Levites. S is a Levite, therefore S is a priest. Incorrect, because not all Levites were priests. But if you wanted to be a priest, you had to be a Levite first. All right, that's just one. Going on. Here's the modus ponens, and it just has a little bit different form. It's still a syllogism, but P's, if P then Q, that's what this sign means here. If then that. If P then Q, P then Q again. And some people would recognize this as deductive logic in the sense that the conclusion is found in the premise, and that can be seen certainly in this one. And then modus tollens, this is kind of same thing. It has a negative connotation, so go with that. Those are just two different kinds of syllogisms that are used in argumentation. Lastly, while you don't have this on this recording, you can go to Red Zone and look at the handout for this lesson. And there is a handout that shows all sorts of fallacious arguments. We need to avoid illogical and fallacious arguments. And you can find that handout in Red Zone. Well, I hope this video kind of helps you understand at least deductive argumentation, a little bit about logic, and understanding better what philosophy is and what we're getting into. It'll be helpful in your life. We use it all the time. And I will post more videos as we go and give you an opportunity to look at them. Have a great day.